Hello and thanks for watching this Cloud9 ERP Solutions video and subscribing to our YouTube channel. In this series of videos of Acumatica Financial Fast Track implementation, we're going to go over accounts receivable. And to preface that, you're going to see the basic things to get accounts receivable operational so you can start creating invoices and tracking accounts receivable in Acumatica. This fast track video is not for every company. There may be specific requirements that you have that are above and beyond what this fast track video covers. So keep that in mind. So continuing on this series, you see we have our Acme company up here. We've set up the GL under finance and banking. And we've also set up sales taxes. So now we're going to go to accounts receivable. The first thing we want to do is go into our customer classes. So customer classes are very similar to vendor classes. We talked about it in another series. And what they do is, in addition to being a category that you can use to filter different reports, it also gives you a template for creating a new customer. And that's based on everything you see here. So for example, if we create a default customer class, all of these different settings, when we choose this customer class and we're creating a new customer, all of these different preference settings will get pulled into the customer profile. You won't have to fill this in every single time. So the first and most obvious is the country. We'll put US in there. We can put in the sales tax zone ID as a default. We have things like price class. We're not going to get into that in our fast track series, but different price class that the customer's in. A default salesperson. We have our credit settings. So, how many days does a customer have to be due before maybe a credit hold would go on their account? You'd set all that up. We have different terms. So in the accounts payable series of videos, you saw we set up a couple. And when we set up the terms, we made them accessible to receivables and payables. We made them accessible to customers and vendors. So we'll use net 30 as a default here. And maybe a default payment method. So this payment method will get passed along to any invoices that are created with this customer. And then you have your default email settings. We have options for write-offs and stuff. So let's hit the save button on this. And then the other thing we want to do is we want to do our GL accounts. So these are the defaults we don't want to put in every single time we create a customer. So the first one is the AR account. Acumatica lets you have different receivable accounts if you'd like them. So that's that. The next one is our revenue account. So if we click here, this will give us a lookup of all of our chart of accounts. One of the things we can do is we can click on the type, clear everything, and select income so we can go through our revenue accounts. And we'll pick sales revenue. The other thing you have here is a discount account. So a discount here, a discount taken versus a cash discount is an option. One of them, this discount would typically be an expense account, but I don't think we have one specific for customers. Now, alternatively, you can use an income account if you want to put it in there, but it'll reverse out and you'll see a negative line when you're looking at your P&L. In this case, we'll just choose a cash discount. Of course, you know how to create new chart of accounts at this point, and you can go in there and add a new one. And we'll use the same thing for a cash discount. The difference between these two is this is a discount that when you're on your invoice, you've provided maybe a 10% for the line, or you provided a document discount for the entire invoice. So that's what this is for. Cash discount is if the customer pays early. You provided payment terms where if they pay in 10 days, they get 1% off, for example. That's the cash discount. And then the prepayment account is if you choose to create a prepayment for this customer, this is the liability account that it'll go into. So that's our general settings and our GL accounts, and we have our customer class now. We click on receivables. The next thing we want to do is go into our receivable preferences. So the first section, just like the other modules, is our numbering settings. And you can see here, there's a numbering sequence for invoices. We share the same numbering sequence for debits and credits and even write-offs. And you can make changes to that. You might make changes to that if you want to have continuity between your old invoice numbers and the new ones in Acumatica. You might go in here and make a change to this numbering sequence so that it'll affect all these sections. We want to automatically post on release. That'll ensure that when we release an invoice or a payment or anything in accounts receivable, it'll automatically hit the general ledger. We'll leave this open because we want to have all the details possible in GL. We don't want to post batch GL documents. When you're getting ready to go live, you may want to use this activate migration mode for importing any open invoices that have balances. So typically in the Fast Track series, we're going to bring in open accounts payable and open accounts receivable so that later on, when customers send in checks and when vendors knock on your door requiring payment for their old invoices, you have documents to apply to and cut checks from. So, but when you do that, you activate migration mode so you don't actually hit the GL during that time period, because your GL and your trial balance will be updated based on the trial balance numbers that you feed it. You're just going to make sure that all your open AR invoices match the trial balance number in your AR that you've imported. And these are some of the data setting entries. Do we want to hold documents when we first create them? No. Do we want to validate document totals on entry? No, I don't like it, but you can certainly change it. For any help on this, click on the help button above, and you'll get information about all these checkboxes and what they do. I'm going to turn this off as well, and I'll save. The next thing we want to do is, under receivables, is we want to create item classes. So item classes, similar to customer classes, are categories for your items, but additionally, they also bring in preferences for that particular item. So maybe we have a services item class, and the item type will be one of these. Keep in mind, we're implementing accounts receivable. There is no distribution, no inventory right now. So our different item types could be something like this. We could say service. We can choose a tax category for this. Maybe in your state, labor is exempt, so you could choose that, or you can have different tax categories for that purpose. And we could choose a base unit of measure. In this case, maybe it's hourly. You could choose each or something like that as well. You want to add additional units of measure, click on the pencil and add as many as you need. So now we have a default item class. Now let's go into our non-stock items. So non-stock items are different than what some people think of. It doesn't necessarily mean, well, it's a product that I keep on the shelf and I order it only when customers need it. Moreover, it means something that's not physical or tangible. In Acumatica, this is typically a service or a labor or some sort of maybe renewing subscription or something like that, but that's typically what it is. Now, non-stock items can be used not only for receivables, they can also be used for payables as well. So when you're entering an AP bill, you can use a non-stock item with the benefit of having that GL expense account being drawn in to the bill, so you don't have to look it up and use that expense account manually. But in this case, let's put in a service. We'll say labor consultant senior. And we'll choose our item class. Again, notice how the item class drew in the defaults. We got that done. And we can put a price, a default price in here. Maybe it's $75 an hour. And then for our GL account, we need to put an expense account here. So we'll put in labor. And then additionally, we can also choose a sales account. So the sales account itself, we have it set up so that we're pulling the revenue account from the customer, but you can choose to change that if you want to. But in this case, we'll choose revenue and we'll put it in here. So now we have a non-stock item in the system that we can use to create invoices. And you can continue to add items here. See our import scenario for importing mass amounts of non-stock items. Additionally, if we go here, we can create a new customer. And what you notice here is that Acumatica is looking for a customer ID. And this might be great. Maybe you want to enter in a manual customer ID. But in the fast track, what we like to do is put in a numbering sequence. So while this is looking for an ID right now, we're going to go into numbering sequence and change that. So let's open that up. So while this is looking for an ID right now, we're going to change this and we're going to add a numbering sequence and get it all set up. So the place to start there is segment keys. And we'll open up our customer. And you could see auto number is not checked, but you can also see that there's a numbering ID that's blank. So if we look for customer, you won't find one. This is something you have to create. So we'll click the pencil on this. We'll call it customer. We'll give it a new number symbol. And one of the things we talked about with vendors is how we could put the letter V in front of our vendor IDs. But for customers, since they're customer facing, you may not choose to do that. So we'll put in maybe 10,000, maybe 100,000. Or we could start at a different sequence. Maybe we want to start with 50,000. And notice Acumatica will figure the rest out. We'll save it. And we'll close this. And now we'll choose our numbering sequence. And we need to check this auto number button. We'll save it. And now if we go back to customers and we refresh, you can see the new symbol there. So as we create new customers, the numbering sequence will automatically apply. So the first thing we do for creating a customer is we choose a customer class. There's only one. We can say Acme Plumbing Company. Maybe that's our customer. 1, 2, 3. Actually, let's put this in Colorado. We'll double check our GL accounts. They look fine. Under financial, you can see that Acumatica, while it doesn't require a statement cycle ID in the customer class, it does happen to require it in the customer profile. So we'll create one statement cycle, even though we don't plan on using it, and we'll make it end of month. And then for this, what we want to do is put in descriptions and put in aging buckets. So this will be 1 to 30. And Acumatica will pretty much fill in the rest of it for you, but you can change it if you'd like. And we'll save and close it. We'll turn off our credit verification for now. Under billing, notice we have the ability to make a few changes here, but everything looks okay. Our printed email settings, something we're going to set up later. And we'll save it. And notice Acumatica automatically put the numbering for us. And we have our first customer set up. Now also, under our shipping settings, we have the ability to select our tax zone. So let's select that. This will default this customer to the Denver tax zone every time. Now keep in mind that tax zones can be automatically selected at the invoice level, if you've populated them with zip codes and if your customer ship to address has a zip code that falls within that range. So we'll save this. And inside the customer profile, you can see there's a lot of options here. One of which is to create an invoice. So let's do that from here. Just to make sure everything looks okay. So this all looks okay. We can add an item here. Notice the price comes up. Maybe there's 5 hours. And everything is working, including the taxes are calculating. You go to taxes here. You can see the tax ID, and this is showing up here. Now, what we like to do for testing purposes is go into our tenants. And we want to copy our tenant to our test tenant. This will allow us to create invoices and some transactions so that we can make sure that the system is working properly. So now that we've copied this, if we click and we switch over to our test data and we go to receivables, we can see our customers here. And we can see our non-stock item. But let's finish creating that invoice. Let's see if we can go through an entire flow. So it's today's date, and it'll be our plumbing company with net 30. Due date is calculating here. We are charging them for some consulting, 5 hours. Notice the tax is working correctly. It's picking sales revenue as the revenue account. And we can release it. Now, just as a spot check, we like to go to financials, take a look at the GL batch. And that's what we're doing here. We're debiting our accounts receivable. We're crediting our sales revenue for $375, a little less because the rest goes to our sales tax payable account. So we'll close this. Let's go to payments. Do a new payment. And it'll be today's date. Customer's very fast. Put a check number in there. We'll choose our customer. And Acumatica will bring up the invoice. And we can check off the invoice we're paying. That'll automatically apply. And we'll see the applied amount here. Or if we have an amount of a check and we want to pay off what we have, we can enter it here as well. In this case, I'm going to check off this invoice. And I'm going to refresh it and release it. Now, if we go to financials and we look at that batch, you can see we credited our accounts receivable, reduced it down to essentially zero because it's the only invoice in the system. And we debited our undeposited funds clearing account for $406.16. And why did we do that? Well, because we're going to make a deposit into the bank account that'll match better. So we'll go over to banking, to new deposit, and we'll put in our cash account that we're going to deposit into. We'll give it a reference number of some sort. We can add our payment here, which is the only one we have, but this is going to be the one we deposit. Add and close, remove the hold, and release it. So now a few things happened here. Of course, our invoice balance went to zero. That happened a while ago. Our payment itself was applied to that invoice. It's got a zero balance on it. But if we go to financials, you'll also see that it cleared and the batch deposit has been made. There's a link to the deposit that we just made right here. So let's close that. And let's take a look at the transaction, the GL transaction that we created. So we debited our company checking account and credited our undeposited account. That zeroed that out. The undeposited is just a clearing account. For the most part, it should be 0, except for any deposits that you have laying around your desk. Let's close that. And one other thing we want to take a look at, if we go to receivables and we go to invoices, we just want to check our aging reports, make sure they look okay. So let's open up this existing invoice that we paid already. And let's copy it. Let's add a new one and let's paste it. And let's move the date back a little bit. And release it. So if we go to receivables and we look at our aging report and we run it, we can see our customer here, and we can see the aging amount is properly in the right bucket, the 31 to 60 day bucket. And we can see our aging report is working as well. So that's accounts receivable, part of our Acumatica Fast Track implementation series. If you have any other questions about this, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you. Thanks again for watching and subscribing, and have a great day.